Thanks, Ed. And I dressed up for the occasion. I'm pretty excited to actually see some people for a change, which is awesome. And I think it is important we acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that we're on, because there's a lot to learn from Indigenous people who can happily coexist in a virtual world, you know, the dream time or any of their parallel dimensions, and the real physical world that they, you know, dominated here in Australia, not dominated, but lived alongside and as part of for tens and tens of thousands of years. And we need to get used to living in a virtual world and a physical world and getting perfectly comfortable with that ourselves. So today I'm going to take the opportunity, thank you very much, to do a talk. It's indulgent for me. I've been doing a lot of learning while I've been sitting here. I've been learning software. I'm finally going to get around to trying to figure out how Simon Wardley's maps really work, and just investing in that. And I thought, well, you know what? Maybe the flip side of that is I'll share some of the things I do know a little bit about, and your challenge to bring something interesting and unusual woke me up for that. So let's get on with it. Let's go straight to it. And if I can just make it all work, there we go. So we are going to learn about the life cycle of caterpillars and butterflies today. Actually, no, we're not. No, that I do want to start you off with this picture, because we are in this weird world of being a little bit of a chrysalis at the moment, where what's it going to turn into? Are we going back to the same thing? Is there a social revolution on order? Nobody's really sure. We're all hopeful and optimistic, and some of us are cynical about it, those kind of things. So I thought, well, that's a really good starting place. And it also a starting place for me, because it leads to one of the great quotes around changing times that I've ever read. It wasn't in any kind of a management textbook. This isn't a Jürgen Apollo one. This is from a fiction author called Pat Barker. And she wrote a marvelous series called the Regeneration Trilogy, 3 books over 3 years. And it's about some real life characters, a couple of World War I most famous poets, Wilfred Owen and Siegfried Sassoon, and an actual doctor whose name was Dr. Rivers. He's Dr. W.H.R. Rivers. You can look him up on not on Instagram. That would be pretty amazing. But no, you can actually look him up on Wikipedia. The last R also stands for Rivers. So he was W.H. Rivers. This quote is describing a scene where he's kind of caught halfway through the treatment of a whole bunch of soldiers who've had tremendous, what we call post-traumatic stress disorder today, but shell shock, and are now behaving very, very weirdly in his hospital. And this talks about how Rivers knew only too well how often the early stages of change or cure mimic deterioration. Cut a chrysalis open and you'll find a rotting caterpillar. What you will never find is that mythical creature, half caterpillar, half butterfly, a fit emblem of the human soul, for those whose cast of mind leads them to seek such emblems. No, the process of transformation consists almost entirely of decay. And I think that's what's making this current world that we're in, where there is a little bit of decay of old ways of working and having to build new. And we all want it to be beautiful and fantastic. So let's see if we can build some sort of proto-butterfly out of some of our skills around how the world works. So that's me. On an ordinary day, I am the chair of the Lean Enterprise Group for Australia, which is the global lean thing. It's the whole ex-Toyota stuff. I'm fascinated by waste. I'm fascinated by productivity. I teach a little bit of that. I have the joy of being associated with some amazing people in the world of medicine who are working really hard at the moment on ensuring things work in a more productive fashion with lean principles at hospitals. So my blessings to them. And I'm best known as sort of the godfather of Agile in Australia, which is a title bestowed on me by my friend Roy Singham, who used to own ThoughtWorks, of course, and doesn't anymore. And I now work for them because I'm not sure I could work for Roy. He was quite a character, but I'd certainly work for ThoughtWorks today. And a little bit famous for making Agile work in Australia. One of several major experiments, the Lonely Planet experiment. There was the Suncorp experiment running in parallel at much larger scale. And then for 7.5 years, the REA Group, realestate.com.au experiment. And the secrets of that I'm hoping to reveal in a book called Super Productive later in the year. And this is one of my favorite photos of that time, is two people doing a damn fine job of explaining some very complex visualized work neither of whom have anything to do with software. There's a marketing person and a salesperson who can explain how a team's works and what's important and what progress is in that thing. That, to me, that's probably peak agile. The book Super Productive was subtitled From Startup to Scale Up. I've had to change that because I think Jürgen's just written a book called Start Up, Screw Up, Scale Up, which is an interesting book. Mine's different. Mine's a bit more of a narrative. And it's about what I've learned in the last 20 years in small startups, medium-sized transformations, and then really large scale-ups and all the things around that. It's based on this model, the super productive cycle. We won't talk about that much today, but I observe this is kind of a reinterpretation of lean thinking. And what lean brings that agile doesn't is a respect for a thing called management, which Australians hate. But yeah, you can drop in on this cycle at any point in time, but you would do, you can go all about resilience. You can be all about inventions and do hack days. You can be all about agile and visualize your work. But you're starting at number 4 if you do that. It's really important to start with number 1 around purpose and strategy and productivity, just good decision making and measurement and all those kind of things. And that will lead to resilience, which is being sorely tested in the world today. If people become resilient, they can invent their way out of problems and change. And then you really do need to pay attention to the productivity of your factory. A little late to do that now for a lot of Australian businesses, but we won't get obsessed about this today. That's you can buy the book to find out more about that, or maybe Ed will invite me back sometime. But you can probably tell with a little bit of grey hair, even on a small screen, that I'm old enough to have lived at a time when these were actually used on the street and where offices looked like this. So this is Jacques Tati's movie Playtime from 1967. I'm not quite that old, but this is exactly the office I walked into in my first few jobs in the 1980s. So he picked it in his sci-fi comedy. And this was an era when big ate small. That was the rule. And if you were a small company, you spent your life worrying about a big company coming along and acquiring you. It was just an inevitability, and so you spent your time shoring up your company to avoid that. If you're a big company, you spent your time wandering around in the jungle trying to buy small companies and do that. So big ate small was the rules in the 1980s and the 1990s. Those rules have changed, and it's now fast eats slow. And in that fast world, I mean, now look what I've lived through in my lifetime is going to this point where a friend of mine, Luke, is a digital citizen of Estonia. It seems the most remarkable thing to be able to do. And you can read a lot about that and what that means online. I've starved at a conference. I won't do that today because I only have to walk upstairs to get a coffee. But at Melbourne Conference and Exhibition Centre, gone hungry because my credit card had been defrauded. And they don't do cash. I thought, wow, what sort of a crazy world is this we now live in? How this is that butterfly transformation halfway through, where the world's largest rock concert, this is a pretty big one that we've organised here, the world's largest rock concert, was inside a computer game. It was inside Fortnite, with millions of people attending with their avatars, a live DJ. And you couldn't avoid the concert if you landed on in Fortnite because it was right there in front of you. But that was fantasy. That was science fiction fantasy only 20 years ago, and now happening all the time. We live in a world where this bloke earned more last year from his social media presence on Instagram in particular than he did from playing football. Again, another mad world that seems to have accelerated upon us as we've gone into the last couple of years and the internet actually works for us. And now what a crazy time we live in. And for the first time in all my lifetime, I can remember, and Google Maps have only been around here for 20 years, but look at the Google map of Los Angeles. The traffic map is green. A little bit of orange in the bottom right there, but green. And this is a level of social bizarreness because of coronavirus. Everyone's staying home. And I never thought that could happen either. Same time, you can corrupt maps. I love this story and the hilarity of a bloke with 94 phones in his little trolley trundling down the main street of Berlin and making the road red. And makes us a very vulnerable world to corruption and all sorts of weird security things along the way. And the rest of us have just spent the last 20 years in the web when it first started was a wonderful thing. I walked into the fight at Lonely Planet over whether we should allow advertising on the website. That was resolved reasonably quickly. But the 90s, the web was not a commercial thing. By the time we kind of finished it in its iterations in recent years, this is what we'd made it look like. And instead of fighting to give you information, it's fighting to steal your attention. And we really have probably ruined it. So this could do with a bit of a butterfly caterpillar kind of transformation as well. And ultimately here we are. And this cartoon, although it's a year old, stands absolutely today. What is it when we go back to work or when the world returns? What are we going to? Oh, it's about podcasts, and oh no, it's nano influencers, it's social commerce, blockchain. We need a blockchain conference, Ed, and voice search and live video. And then somebody will pipe up, shouldn't we talk about our strategy first? Looks around. No, this will be the year of VR, and that is the distraction we face. We really do need to just settle down, because that lady in the bottom right is correct. We should talk about our strategy first. And on that, I want to talk about Amazon, because I do believe Amazon have done an amazing job of strategy. As a former public employee of a publishing company, I saw the transformation take place. I was witness to Australia's bookstores getting crushed accordingly. Some of you might remember a little shop called McGill's, where I used to go and buy all my technical books. Dymocks, Angus and Robertsons are kind of shadows of their former selves. In America, Borders and Barnes and Noble. Now, I think Ed has put his hand up to say we should just see if our poll functionality is working before we dive in any further. And is this the first quiz, Ed?
Yes, I meant to put it on a bit earlier. So
that's good. Well, let's do it. I'm fascinated to find out, where in the world are you? You can see, you can interact with your screen. Do us a favor and tell us where in the world you've come from. I hope there's a few Kiwis on there.
There are, yeah.
Let's find out for facts. I'm in Vic. Submit. How soon do we get the results of that? Is it like an Australian election and we have to wait overnight for the specials to be counted?
It's very quick. I can end poll and then share the results.
Wow, let's see.
Okay.
This virtual, amazingly mad world.
Most people are in Vic. I'll show you. Here we go.
Look at that.
There we go.
It's all our friends and neighbours. A couple of Queenslanders. Fantastic. Maybe one.
Yep.
All right. Well, let's take that geographic diversity and talk about the Amazon, not the basin or the river, the company. So Amazon, I just checked, market cap, 994 billion American dollars. It's been a 25-year journey. We love them or we hate them. We've loved and hated them throughout that period of time. But one thing is for sure, they are brilliant at strategy. And if you wanted to do strategy like Amazon, you need to learn a few lessons. And they're very easily learned, actually. I really object to strategy being kind of seen as a privilege or a dark art or a wizard type skill that only the executives get to do. I think that will result in bad strategy. It's people closest to customers and then equipped with a few thinking models about how it works can be incredibly valuable. So let's proceed. Now, we know Amazon as a bookstore, whether it's, they're the ones who pioneered people like you, like books like this. You can see my tastes there from a screen grab I've done from my account. People know it also as a marketplace, not so much in Australia yet. And this is the mistake people in misjudgment they make of Amazon's Australian strategy is 40% of Amazon's revenue comes from helping other people sell on their e-commerce platform, which is the marketplace. That's core to their growth, and their strategy is to get small businesses off their own websites or maybe a small Squarespace site, and then their store runs on Amazon. That's 40% of their revenue. And the number 40% is also important because at Christmas time, at the holiday season, as they call it in America, 40% of all online revenue in buying and selling things like for Christmas and stuff is done on the Amazon platform. It's an immensely successful business. Now, we know them as well as Amazon Prime. I have a Prime subscription, watch a couple of movies. I haven't even engaged in the music that comes for free with it, which is actually pretty good. It's a few bucks a month. It's incredible. And it's got Audible, all of the things that if you're a media consumer you love, they have managed to build their way into. Now, they've had a couple of classic failures as well. The Fire Phone, that was a write-off of 250 million, which was a fraction of what they'd actually wasted on the phone. That was never going to work. And Jeff Bezos's answer to the analysts when he was cross-examined at the next quarterly meeting about how he could tolerate such losses and such a write-off for the company, his answer was, "Wow, well, you think that's a mistake? You should see some of the mistakes we've got to make yet. That's a cheap one," which is frightening. For the amount of cash they've got to prepare incredible experiments around innovation. So Amazon Web Services has obviously been very core. Many of us on the call probably are a customer of Amazon Web Services in one way. That's clearly technology, and their comfort with technology is the engine room of Amazon's domination and their strategy. Actually, no, it's not. That's a trick question. What's core to Amazon is customer service. And this is a graph showing the growth of Amazon Prime memberships since 2010. It's just incredible. 150 million people like me pay to be an Amazon customer. And when adding Whole Foods, that caused an incredible uptick in America in the last period, that 2019 period. But to get people to pay for your customer service, that makes no sense to people at all. It should do, though, because there's plenty of research, and here's some from PricewaterhouseCoopers, showing that people are willing to pay for things on the y-axis, things that are important to them on the x-axis. So if we look at what ends up in the top right-hand corner, always the most exciting part of a quadrant diagram, people are willing to pay for and highly value efficiency, convenience, friendly service, knowledgeable service, and easy payment, which is exactly the zone they play in. Now, they must have had this graph from research 25 years ago when they started out figuring out what people were willing to pay for. And so much Australian strategy is built around the idea that people aren't willing to pay for service on the web, that they just want everything for free and it has to be cheap and we have to exploit our staff, all those kind of things. That's also an Uber attitude. So that's an important graph for us when we're thinking about what the strategic landscape is. And if you're going to leave the call today with anything, it's understanding where you can fit on that and being brave about asking people to pay. Whole Foods was a remarkable acquisition. It means on the West Coast, nobody's more than about 20 miles from an Amazon physical store. And in terms of taking on the likes of Walmart, their strategy is brutal. You can read about that in a book called The Four. It basically come in, Whole Foods prices were known to be expensive. They're the only food I would actually buy in a grocery in America. Amazon bought them, dropped the prices nearly 20%, putting them financially underwater, so going unprofitable, sucked the living life out of Walmart and all the nearby stores and just waited. So it's the equivalent of, basically popping on a Jacques Cousteau aqualung, going underwater with a very large oxygen tank and just waiting for everyone else to drown, then occupying their land, which it's really, really brutal strategy. And you can see they've strategically picked their spots in the United States to take on Walmart, who are doing their level best to come back with an e-commerce play. It was that Prime Now added to the local Whole Foods that boosted them 40 million members on Prime accordingly. You can get it anywhere. This is in London. This is 2 years ago, popping up delivery centres and in the forecourts of a petrol station. Of course, you've probably seen this lovely video of their little Amazon Prime drone. They've got one that runs along the streets. They've got one that flies through the air. And it just doesn't pay to go, oh, that's bullshit. That'll never happen. And it's like, you know what? The science fiction stuff has a way of happening. And as long as we value service so highly, that's going to be the case. This is not some far-flung Amazon third world warehouse. This is the Dandenong warehouse in Melbourne. And it's through the brilliance at managing this operational excellence and their supply chain that they've gone from being just a fraction of all of those amazing retail stores in the United States to being worth several times more than all of them put together. So they're clearly good at strategy. What do we know about how they do that? Well, part of it is the innovation. So as you remember back to my super productive cycle, good management leads to a certain amount of bounce back ability. And then people who are feeling a little bit more psychologically safe can invent. I've been to the Amazon Go store in San Francisco. That's a truly weird experience. Feel like you're shoplifting. And wouldn't it have been amazing if the product on the right had really worked at scale? This was Amazon Care, which was an app that had healthcare built into it. They trialed it with Amazon staff only. I don't know where it's at today, but video medicine, potential to get a nurse practitioner to come and visit you, delivery of the resulting drugs, text conversations. What an amazing idea for scaling medicine up. And that hasn't gone away. That could have been an incredible thing for us to have had today. And Amazon believed that could cut the cost of healthcare in the United States by 2/3, which will upset a large number of highly invested sort of, I guess, what do you call, they're sort of monopoly in a way, all joined hands. One of these two is a joke. And so Amazon does everything, of course. They have a strategic play in every sector. This is their Amazon dating site on the left-hand side of your screen. On the right-hand side is a customer service conversation in the UK where a robot is saying, hello, I understand your child has accidentally placed an order and you wish to cancel the order with a refund. I can help you. And the human says, great, thank you. The customer service robot says, just to confirm, you're referring to the Extreme Farts extension pack. Yes, that's the one. Now, which one of these two is a joke? I won't know. You can probably guess which one's a joke. Nobody has an Extreme Farts extension pack. That is a child's fantasy, except Amazon do. If you own an Alexa, you can buy an Extreme Farts extension pack. And that's what this particular customer, because you can order them by just talking to your Amazon Alexa, is trying to get her money back on. So, what a crazy world we live in. Now, what they do is have 100% clarity about the battlefield that they're on. So if we're talking about how strategy works, you need to understand you're on a playing field. There are different players. It's a landscape. You go back to any of the great theorists, they'll use that similar sort of a language. The combination is clever. If you can get search, social, and sell, you can put a tick in each of those boxes. That is the future. And if you look at the difference just between a Google search and an Amazon search for something like a face mask, which is obviously very timely at the moment, it's really fascinating because now in the United States, Amazon's search results are way better than Google's. Here in Australia, we search for products and services immediately on Google. If you're an American, 55, 60% of the time, you go directly to Amazon to do that search. And there's a social element to their business. They have a social media a community with 300 million members that nobody's ever heard of. So they've got social, they've got search, they've got sell. And you look at the people chasing the same strategy today is that the neobanks picking off niches in the Australian market. Productivity tools are all social. There's an element of search to them. I love the searchability in Slack. Spotify for music, TikTok for entertainment, Instagram for photography. That's the recipe: search, social, and sell. Now they're doing some remarkable things when you look behind the scenes in terms of unbundling the value streams. So there's some pretty skilled strategists for sure. And here's a great slide I've stolen, which is the way Amazon was unbundling the bank 2 years ago. So all the services that banks thought they had as a monopoly, all getting unbundled and recreated as an Amazon service, which happens kind of weirdly, just stealthily over time. And they've done it to real estate. My former employer, realestate.com.au, the REA group, we were tracking this kind of thing where in America, real estate works on the basis of leads. It's not display advertising business. It's how many people does this advert attract to buy the home or to sell a home like it. And the agents pay for the names and phone numbers of people who might be interested in selling a home or buying a home. Amazon got in the middle of that because they are the place to go looking for a reputable vendor of anything. So if you want to find out who's the most trusted realtor, it's the same as finding the most trusted lawyer, dog walker, or other thing on Amazon Marketplace. They got into that. They inserted themselves in that chain and offered up to $5,000 worth of Amazon security, home management, Alexa equipment. If you took the lead through them, they were clearly getting that $5,000 back off the real estate agent as a kickback. They were pretty open about that. And suddenly they're in real estate. They're in real estate in terms of new property development. And they look for waste. This is why I love Muda, as Amazon loves Muda, is that they looked for where was the friction and waste in the value stream of building new homes. And I tell you, Australia is top of the pops when it comes to the most wasteful people in building a home. Up 6 to 9 months to get a new home built from plans up to actually having the home you can move into. Amazon just saw all the waste in it. They build prefabricated homes. They're not horrible prefabricated sheds like you went to school in. These are Danish designed, made in Estonia, shipped in containers. The first 2 of these are in Australia now. The dollar's not helping. It's 105,000 American. Be assembled by 2 people in 6 weeks. And if you think of a situation like the last crisis Australia faced, and an enormous number of people needing to rebuild their homes from bushfires, this is just a sensible thing to do. Why? And to beat Amazon now, you have to be this good, and you have to understand supply chains and thinking about what can you take the waste out of. And as a result, well, $994 billion was the market cap this morning. It was $1 trillion not so long ago. They're one of only a couple of companies that have ever got there. How they got there? Oh, okay, here we go. This is a great idea, Ed. Let's do a poll. Ed's gone quiet, so I'm going to read it out. When was the last time you bought something from Amazon? Could be an Audible, could be a book, could be some food, could be, don't know, anything you can buy on Amazon.com.au.
I don't know.
I clicked today. I bought an Audible this morning from a book someone had recommended to me. What's everyone say, Ed?
3 people said they bought something today.
And there's a couple of people who've never bought anything on Amazon. That's incredible. Well, not incredible. I mean, there's a full diverse range of people, and people will have political opposition to it. But yeah, that is the future, isn't it? The last time you bought something from Amazon. A couple of us were today. I'm pleased I'm not the only Amazon addict. Here's the recipe. You can read about this in The 4, which is a book you can buy on Amazon if you want to. But really the most important ones for me are product and service differentiation, which when we all go back to work in the normal sense in our day jobs, should it be going back to normal at all, we'll need to really think about that, how we differentiate ourselves from our competitors accordingly. Think about your own employer. Is it somewhere that if it goes on your Seek profile or your LinkedIn profile, that it's a career accelerant? That's certainly one of the 8 factors that makes up trillion-dollar companies' recipes. But you can read Scott Galloway's book on all that. It is pretty fascinating. I want to talk about the philosophy of that, where they have a philosophy called day 1, and it's never allowed to be day 2. So you must never stop thinking like, it's new, it's edgy, it's a startup. That's a really strong part of their culture. Having visited Amazon Web Services here in Melbourne recently, this was a big part of the conversation about their success factor. And I've stolen a quote from another great book called Loon Shots about where it goes wrong for 99.9% of organizations. Why don't they keep innovating? Why don't they keep thinking about their strategy? And Safi Bakal's experience is that people's stake in outcomes is outweighed by the perks of rank. He said, think of it as the moment in a meeting where you were discussing a product or service and someone who's seen you was there, and you actually felt you had more benefit from making them laugh or getting them to agree with you for your career than you did from saying something challenging about the product. And that's a dark moment in your organization. Watch for that moment, and Amazon watch for it all the time. Okay, so how do we do strategy like Amazon? First, we hire a teenager. Now, that might seem like a weird thing to do. I've got a couple to spare if you need one. But yeah, let's talk about strategies from a teenage perspective. Now, this is kind of the game I grew up. As a teenager, I grew up on this one. This is Space Invaders, 1978. It invented one remarkable factor, and that might be a quiz question for all of you as to what was Space Invaders' single most impactful change to the genre of gaming, in Nigel's humble opinion anyway. So it's a really interesting feature as we talk about strategy going forward, because that as much as inventing pixels moving backwards and forwards to kill the invaders, it was something else that was incredibly clever, but not terribly strategic, to be honest. As a teenager, 1978, so I was 15, I was not learning a lot of strategy there. I was learning speed, absolutely, and anticipation, but nothing to do with strategy. Compare that to today, and games like Fortnite, which are absolutely strategy based. So to succeed today, hire somebody who plays Fortnite. And there's probably people on the phone who quite like their teenagers to get the hell off Fortnite, having probably spent all the last 2 weeks at home on it. And I'm here to say, you know what, there may be some significant benefit to being good at this game. For those of you who don't know Fortnite, that's the battle bus on its way to the island. There's a good 100 people on there about to fight their way in battle royale to a point of survival. Last one standing wins the game. This bloke, this teenager, I think he's 15 years old, Booger, just won $1 million. In a global tournament, he puts it's down to speed and strategy in his case. And there you can see there's an amazing trophy with the battle bus on it. He won it. And esports are the fastest growing thing. Just an absolutely incredible industry. And we shouldn't write it off. I commend anyone who has a Fortnite addict in the family to go and sit with them and just watch what they do and learn from the way they think, because it is in fact quite strategic. One of the categories of players in Fortnite is called the boomer. The young players hate boomers because they tend to sit back, watch what's going on, and then leap in. They're slower with their reactions, obviously. Older players don't have the speed, but they have the strategy. And how old do you reckon a boomer is in Fortnite parlance, Fortnite speak? A boomer is anyone over the age of 20. That is a deep insult to be called a boomer. So as a real boomer, that's kind of interesting. And it is, you can see, it's quite interestingly, even though this is a battle royale, it's quite collaborative. You have to test and learn. You have to work in short cycles. You have to have a strategy as to how you're going to do. You need to learn in an agile way. You need to learn from doing. And you really need, your first strategic move is, when do you jump off this bus? Where on that island are you going to land? And it's surprisingly collaborative. But the key, if you want your kids to stop playing Fortnite, I've got a clue for you. Just get some electrical tape onto their computer, and along the bottom there, just cover that bit there and this bit here. Now, what happens when I cover up those two things is that the whole essence of the game goes away. I can no longer see the map, and so I can no longer see where I am on the map. I can no longer see how much loot I have for building myself bases, swapping weapons, how much money and medicine and all those kind of things, and how much life I've gained and how much life and health I have left. You remove those, and this is just a dumb shooting game. And here's your first clue on strategy, unveiling all the secrets of strategy. You must know where you are and what you've got and where you've come from to win. From there, collaboration, testing, learning, trying, respawning, going and learning on YouTube how to get past this particular hazard. That's now the skills you need, which the teenagers do with absolute alacrity. So in your own office, in your own workspace, just think about, do you have a map of where you are? Do you have a map of how much life you have left, your progress as to where you're going, and how much loot you've got, how much stuff's cost? A lot of places don't. It's a fundamental error. They're just basically there shooting randomly. And it doesn't really matter whether you're playing Minecraft, which is another game which invokes the same characteristics of collaboration, of learning, of building, testing things. There's recipes known, and look at that. You've got your assets, you've got your menu with what you do. And it's all about collaboration and combination. Absolutely incredible, the world. So I encourage anyone who's been a bit frustrated by their nephews, nieces, grandchildren, or otherwise being stuck in these games to go and sit with them for an hour and learn how they do it. Pokemon Go, the same. I mean, people laughed, but nobody plays Pokemon Go anymore. No, millions of people play Pokemon Go today. It's become more and more collaborative, learning. It's created an entire off-world, YouTube-based learning thing. It's collaboration and it's social. So that social and search and sell have been wrapped up beautifully in Pokemon Go. And this basically is what we all think strategy looks like. So teenagers think strategy looks like the last 6 slides, and we think it looks like this. The boss noticed sales declining. Our plan is to invent some sort of doohickey that everyone wants to buy, says the pointy-headed boss. And then heads over to the IT department. Oh, the visionary leadership work's done. How long will your part take? Hashtag no estimate. So like that strategy at big organizations typically today, this is what we need to fix by you becoming a strategy expert. This is strategy at startups. And this is from an episode of that wonderful show, South Park, where the boys, it's called the Underpants Gnomes, and the boys think and their parents are very mad at them. Their underpants are all going missing. And eventually, out the corner of his eye, one of them spots a gnome running across the floor, stealing his underpants, and chases him back to the cave where the gnomes all are, and asks him, "What are you doing? Why are you stealing underpants?" And he takes him over to his startup strategy board, his agile board, and says, "Here's our strategy. Phase 1, collect underpants. Phase 2, ? Phase 3, profit." And that is really a terribly funny description of a lot of strategy in startups, unfortunately. Here's the fundamentals of strategy. Now, before we get into this, I'm just going to pass to Ed. Ed, have we got any burning questions or things that I've missed or things that I haven't been clear on?
We had a couple of questions around Amazon.
Yep.
Which are in the Q&A, which you should be able to see.
Okay, I haven't had that open, I will confess. Q&A, there we go. I need to put that down on the left-hand side there, which now everyone can see, I presume.
No.
Critical thing about the impact on communities, specifically low-wage jobs and dehumanize. Absolutely. I mean, it is, it's just an unbelievable, the gigification of the whole thing. I don't know anyone who's worked at Amazon who's had a good time. And that's all the way up to Amazon Web Services, where they're an inhumane attitude towards workers, that's for sure. I'm not sure how to solve that. I'm hoping that doesn't happen to quite the same extent in Australia, although their labour rules seems to be sort of been worked around. So probably a collective thing. Hope to goodness it doesn't take off in the rest of the world as a way of working. There's Rick's. Besides strategy, does winning the game involve collaboration, or does one have to do their own hero thing? No, absolutely, it is a collaboration thing in my mind because of the complexity of the networks that we face. your ecosystem. It's very difficult to win. Even in Battle Royale, people team up and collaborate to a point in the game, after which it's down to the last few and they're on their own. So, but you will not get to the end if you don't collaborate in some way. And the higher purpose of all of that, apart from passing time and while we're all stuck at home with coronavirus, I hope is actually learning. And I just don't know whether that was an overt thing or whether it was an inadvertent thing. But yeah, that would be my answers to those. Now we should keep going. We've got 17 minutes to cover how to do strategy. So, and we'll go from there. So strategy is necessary because of this thing, this wonderful lean concept of Kaizen. And the other thing which nobody flipped to the next chapter, everyone knew Kaizen was continuous improvement. It relates to running services or products in a continually improving way. At the end of that piece, it says actually you can't Kaizen something forever. There comes a time, if you look at this sort of graph I've got here, the y-axis is percentage growth. So make that revenue or number of customers or whatever. It comes a time when your percentage growth starts to turn down again, no matter what you do, no matter how much you polish that thing and improve its efficiency, you stop growing with the thing. I'm not saying growth is a core necessity, but it provides the opportunities for growing in other ways. So that's take, for example, at the REA Group, that is display advertising for property. They know darn well they need to diversify into other product sets like financial services, rentals, those kind of things. So they start the green lines, and Amazon are particularly good, and Google as well, at acknowledging the fact that they need these green lines. The green line is a leap because you have to take some people from working on the red line product over to something else that feels terrible to work on at the start. And this is your innovative leap. This is your kaikaku. And kaikaku is a recipe, a Toyota-based recipe for a very specific set of rules around how you innovate. And you start from scratch again. And this was the Amazon fire, was a green line, a kaikaku line that failed. And what you have to do is have enough capital to allow you to fail a fair few times before you find the green line that works. Doesn't feel good to work on those. Your mates back on the red line are looking sideways at you. Why are you stealing our revenue with your new product? Why are you lowering all those kind of things? But the battle on the red line will be lost eventually, for sure. So this is the driver. This is the gravitational force that forces us to think about strategy over time. Now, here is how it's done. So this is it. This is the recipe revealed. Is that you've got to need to do something. You've got your red line and your green line. What do we do next? Three columns here. There's a column around customer, a column around product, and a column around territory. And you just choose your path. In the same way you land on the island, you now choose your path. Now, pretty much everyone chooses path one, whether they like it or not, because you have your existing customers, your existing product, and your existing territory. This is the red line of the Kaizen Kaikaku drawing. And I should acknowledge George Foster, who's a brilliant Australian professor at Stanford. And this is the basis of his work, which he founded early in the 2000s, looking at companies like Amazon and Google and Yahoo and seeing and really simplifying what strategy becomes. Now, the challenge is that with existing customers, existing product, existing territory, there's not a lot of options for you to play with, and it comes down to product features and price. And that's cool. You need to do that. But how do you get to play on one other? And the essentials that Foster teaches are that you do that one and one other. And so many mistakes are made in strategy by having more than one other line to run down. We'll go through a couple of them. Now, in our particular battlefield, I wanted to cover this. So, one of those things we do, get to the highest point. It's a kind of a weird biological thing we have, kind of the Savannah effect, someone once called it, where you reduce your sense of threat by going to the high ground and looking around. The modern equivalent is making a list in your book of what's going on. but it's basic tactical things. So we have this overlap of two circles, as many of us work in the world of digital products. And digital products are made of four first-class citizens. And so many of our colleagues in needing to be brought along on the strategy journey don't get this. And this is a key thing to teach. So the digital products, there's features, defects, risks. We make habits and culture by the way we behave building those digital products, and we create technical debt. Now, when people say product management, all they think about is features. And our mission in the next couple of years is to explain to our teammates on the battlefield, actually, you know what, every action has a parallel defect action, a risks action, a habits, and a technical debt action. Because our productivity is being hindered by technical debt. Too much WIP, conflicting priorities, unknown dependencies, and unplanned work. So those are the time thieves, which Grandis wrote about. So now technical debt's right in the middle of it, and it's in both. We make it and cannot unmake it, and it's killing our productivity. So this is our battlefield in terms of making digital products. Just a side note that people like Spotify, this is Kristen from Spotify, they've noted the exact same thing. And if we go back there, you know, the resulting waste and pain that they suffer from having to play on this battlefield comes down to priorities. And so their priority on the battlefield is around decision making. And there is a new Spotify model emerging, which is built around debating and deciding on what products to develop. And it's very data centric. It's called the DIBS model. It's around gaining data, having an insight or a theory or a conclusion drawn from that data. The B is belief, so a hypothesis that you can test. And the last is a bet, which is a decision to test that belief in practice by having a team. And you can have small bets, 2 people for a week. You can have a medium bet, a squad for a month, or a huge bet, like bet the whole company, which is what they're doing on machine learning at the moment. And that's almost everyone has a part of that particular bet at Spotify today. So that's cool. That's their strategy, is to find a new way of making decisions on that difficult battlefield. So the real hard bit is, because you're all doing number one, is which other one can you do? And the answer is you have to earn it. To turn right at the start there and go to new customers, you need to be a systems thinker about customers. Equally good at product and territory expansion, but your main core ability will be systems thinking around customer. How would I tell if you're that? You might have a CRM, for example, but I would come in and go, actually, is your CRM as full of people who are not your customer as people who are your customer? And if you look at Amazon, their ability, because of their partnerships with people like Google and Facebook, their knowledge of non-customers is pretty remarkable. Of inactive customers is pretty remarkable. And so that's how you manage to turn right at the first column and go, let's go after some new customers. If you're thinking about new product development being a way you want to have to, to pass down some of the other strategies, you need to be systematically great at product development. Now, can you do human-centered design? Do you have a research facility? Do you have a consumer facility? Those are the pieces of evidence I would look for in your workplace as to whether you are systems thinking around product. And territories, if you want to expand by territories, which a lot of businesses do. I take a simple example of something I'm passionate about is Orange Sky Laundry, the Brisbane team who invented washing clothes for homeless and connection and communication during the process of washing their clothes by having washing machines in a van. They recently went to a new territory. They took the partnerships and products. They went to a new territory in New Zealand and found it quite challenging because of the cultural differences, the political differences around the context for homelessness in New Zealand are different to Australia. And so they saw the challenge of and they're going, actually, we'll get good at doing new territories before we ever try going to America, for example. And that's their strategy, is to become good at new territories. So there it is. What are you going to encourage your team? What are you going to encourage your company to be good at? Have a look for where you're good at systematically thinking about stuff. Now, the landscapes are very complex. This is the map we used to use at REA Group for the landscape around residential property, which is being sorely upset at the moment by the current kind of loss of jobs and companies in the COVID problem. Now, we used to think, oh my God, the complexity of that. This is, and did our heads in, we went our heads in our hands going, oh my God, we can't do anything. It's so complex. Actually, it turns out complexity isn't the problem. And it's a bit like the current environment with the COVID virus. Ambiguity is the problem. And in a what's called a VUCA world, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, you can deal with the volatility. You just, you have shorter cycles to your work. You can deal with the uncertainty. You can say, okay, we're going to have a bet here and a bet there. Complexity, oh, you know what? You just have to dance with the system, as Danella Meadows said. Ambiguity is the most difficult to deal with. And so just people say, oh, keep it simple. No, that's not the answer. It doesn't solve ambiguity. Clarity solves ambiguity. And I think if I was suffering one thing from the current period, it's this ambiguity about whether we should, go back to it. Should we hoard things for 2 weeks or not? Is it dangerous or not? And that's what's kind of makes the battlefield really hard. Strategy clue number 10 is how do you figure it out is you do exactly the same as you do when your kids at a restaurant are really getting angsted by the fact they can't finish that puzzle in the bottom right hand corner, the monkey through the maze, which is a strategy exercise. How you help your kid who's frustrated and has drawn 10 lines already and is going on, Mum, I can't do this, or Auntie, I can't do this. I'll leave that with you. We'll make that a puzzle question. How do you help a child navigate that menu? Because that is exactly what you do to write strategy. We come back to it. Remind me about that one. So first, so that's strategy by Amazon, right? So hire a teenager because they're brilliant at strategy. We're getting a generation coming through who will be awesome at it. Now there's an alternate, and it's a humanistic approach to strategy. And the irony is the first thing you have to do is hire a teenager. What does that mean? Well, I got to see this guy, Douglas Rushkoff, talk last year at a ThoughtWorks conference of all things, actually, and read his book called Team Human. And I just loved it because I'm going, wow, we can have a humanistic approach to all this. And in the book, he talks about these 7 rules for business in the 2020s. And I'm really excited about these. And I hope some of these start to come into play as we all go back to work. So the alternative rules for 2020 business strategy. Number 1, what if we made everyone rich? Not just Jeff Bezos. What if we did share that out? If you have that as your core, you'll become successful. Number 2, what if we aim for no externalities, no pollution, no future generations having to pay off our debts? Is that a strategy? It turns out it might be. Transparent processes, so people can see what we're doing. And people don't want to be a customer anymore. Like a customer, they know what that means. They're treated with disdain. You're a number, you're a reference, you're a segment. People want to be a human in an ecosystem. They want to be part of your family. They want to be part of your neighborhood. And number 4, hire a teenager. Because by be a family business, what Rushkoff's talking about is, what would it take for your employer to be a place where your teenager wanted to work? And if you can decipher that, what it is that's not right about your workplace, and I think about this, the places I've worked in and my teenagers, it's like, wow, there's been places I've worked where a lot of things would have had to have changed because of their values. They would not want to work at a place that exploited others. They want to work at a place that is balanced on the economy, balanced on the environment, balanced on generations and learning. And you go, wow, maybe if that's the synthetic recipe for building up a great business. There are other rules: embracing diversity, humans not customers, and his last one, find the others, which is a quote from the 1960s. But you're not alone. And Rushkoff believes this is the future of business and business strategy. I will do my level best to help him make that possible, because it turns out Amazon didn't crush all the bookstores. Now, yes, they crushed Borders, Barnes and Noble, McGill's, Angus and Robertson, all those kind of people. But in America today, there are more bookstores than in 1996. And those bookstores are more profitable. It was a stunning outcome for me to discover. And it's because of their strategy. And they took the Rushkoff method. And they call it, it's the American Booksellers Association, who were core to it. They built community, curation, convening people in a collective approach. And if I just look at Avenue Books or Readings in Melbourne, you've probably got some bookstores in these stores are doing really well, and we all support them. And this is such a shock. This was not what Amazon believed would happen over time. And this is the perfect expression of an alternate approach to strategy. You still need to go down those arms, but this becomes an inspiration for that. And the thing is, will anyone do it? I'm not sure if anyone will do it. And we'll go to a great systems thinker, Douglas Russell. And this great quote: the only thing more difficult than starting something new in an organization is stopping something old. And that's why we're hopeless at strategy, is we just can't decide what not to do, even if we're good at deciding what we would like to do. So that's the talk. It took just under an hour, but we've been here an hour. Ed, I'm going to hand to you. And
Sure, I've got a question from Shripad for you.
Yeah, please.
I'll read it. It's in the Q&A.
Yep.
I see a lot of kids' curiosity is fed by instant gratification. When it comes to resilience, how shall we keep the newbies still interested in work?
A sense of purpose. So that's for me, the key is, and the role of leadership around coaching and a sense of purpose and a sense of challenge, which is an old lean principle, is really, really key. And purpose beyond a kind of a quick dopamine hit. If the only purpose they've got is getting dopamine hits, then they will do the simple stuff over and over again. If you look at the sense of, Fortnite takes hours. A battle royale takes hours. That's why the kids are up all night. So they're not going to sustain that without a clear sense of purpose and a sense of achievement. My definition of productivity: measurable progress towards a meaningful goal. So you've got to know where you are on the map and all your measured outcomes, but the goal has to be meaningful. Winning Fortnite is meaningful. Collaborating with your friends is part of the journey along the way. And that's only one mode of Fortnite, by the way. There are also more creative modes, and a Red Cross Help the People mode as well, which is really cool.
Okay. I'm aware that people will probably be have other things that they need to get onto, but if those people who want to stick around for a few more minutes, we can continue on here if you're able to, Nigel, for a couple of minutes.
Cool, I'd love to.
Okay, we could try an experiment in that if you raise your hand, I can unmute you, and if you unmute your mic, you can talk.
Oh, that's high tech. Let's do that.
We haven't actually really done this much before, but
let's experiment.
For those who are heading off, thanks for coming along to this one. And as I said at the start, there's more coming along.
Yeah, thanks for being my guinea pigs.
We've had a few thank yous there in the chat as well for you.
Cool.
A few links and ideas from some people about books. Barry O'Reilly gets a mention. Teamhuman.fm, says Sean Byrne. Hooked is a good book on the subject of addicting people to apps, says John. Liam says thanks. Will the recording be made available? All the talks in Last Anywhere are being made available on the Last Anywhere website. It takes a couple of days for me to get the time to, I'm having a little bit more time at the moment now because there's not so much of a a bottleneck of me having to do 9 or 10 of them at once. Got Annie who's raised a hand, so I'll just click allow to talk now, Annie, and then to talk you can unmute yourself.
Hello.
Go ahead.
Annie?
Nigel, I don't know if you can see me. I don't know if my camera's even working, but
No, I can hear you beautifully.
Okay, lovely. Really, one of the things I remember years ago, you might remember me from AXA, and you gave me and some of my colleagues at Planet when you were working at Lunar Tractor.
Yep.
Now, one of the things that you've said about visual management boards in the past was around paper and cardboard beating digital every time because of the physical contact with that. How do you think we can compensate for that in a more where we're forced to be digitally connected? What's your views on pivoting the stand-up in particular and making it incredibly engaging?
Yeah, I'm amazed at the Jira share price, or the Atlassian share price. They're just booming and hiring, and
I just muted Annie again because we're getting an echo.
Oh, cool, getting the echo. Look, it's a huge challenge, and I think it's going to be a very constraining media to have to use Trello or Jira, or there's a few thought workers use Mural as a kind of more interactive tool as well. Apparently that's pretty good. And, now everyone's quite cognizant about the security issues of any systems that they use. And that's really important too. You don't want your competitors being able to randomly log into your boards. We found, I like Trello. It's my personal kind of management tool as well as lists in my book. I'm an avid list maker. Lists are how I reduce my stress load from a time like this. It's I reduce my, what Lean teaches us is to shorten the cycles. So I have a daily huddle of about 2 of us, and I have goals, and I'm aiming to figure out what my priorities are for the day. I don't need to use Trello for those because I don't have many goals in a particular day, but a team building software could quite probably use it. It's really about the conversation that goes with it and becoming less about the ritual. And it's not a brag list of how much I did yesterday. It's a really difficult time right now for people to feel productive. And because we're learning it, it's what I describe as the greatest unsupervised workplace sociology experiment in history, and it's the most giant simulation of what a different form of corporate governance looks like. We weren't supposed to know how to do this at all. So I think the experiments, has anyone else online other than had any good experience with how stand-ups are going on in this crazy digital world? Type it in the webinar chat. I find just the human contact incredibly valuable.
What I've seen, Nigel, it's Annie again, is just witnessing stand-ups by Zoom in particular. People aren't used to the rhythm and the ritual, and people are talking all over each other. I think that people will get adjusted to it in time. I think the key challenge is having that mindset that it's okay to have a go and to fail and to learn. So I liked your reminder of the Lean plus Agile, which is based to a short cycle, and just having a go and practice and adjust. So I think people need to get into that space.
For me, the interesting thing is what you took into this kind of surprise experiment with, the control variable being a very small, greebly thing called a virus. All of the problems you took into it that your team was suffering before will be amplified doubly, triply in a pure digital offline or online environment. So if you were having difficulty at stand-ups because people were talking all over each other, you possibly weren't noticing it because the human capacity to process that with a face-to-face thing is so much richer. And now if they've got the same habit in an online environment, it's going to be really amplified and noticeable. So yeah, this just by going remote didn't solve the human behavioral problems. Another question, Ed. It's
Yeah,
Warren.
Warren has put his hand up.
Warren.
It is also in the Q&A, but I'll allow you to talk, Warren, if you want to.
Yeah, I'd like to hear Warren's voice.
Cool. Hi, thanks, Ed, and it was a good talk, Nigel. It's really, really good to see. Can everyone hear me? Firstly,
Yep.
So, firstly, it's good to see systems thinking get a bit of a shout out. The question I sort of have is, given the amount of different ways of thinking that is out there, is it a fair observation that systems thinking has sort of kind of lost its trendiness or its glamour? And if so, how do we sort of get people to rediscover that, given it plays such an important part in actually providing the best possible outcomes for people in terms of solving their problems?
Yeah, I agree. If I had a magic wand, I'd go back in time and, the 90s when Agile started to grab all the oxygen. If we just kept a conversation going about systems thinking and lean, I mean, systems thinking goes back to the 50s and 60s. It's understanding things to be ecosystems and everything's connected in one way or another. Really now if people are not quite familiar, the three branches of the tree are systems thinking has continued and is used in larger ecosystem thinking, planning, those kind of things. And Danella Meadows' book, absolutely, I think 2007, Thinking in Systems is the key literature. Systems thinking also turns up in John Seddon's work around the Vanguard method of service organizations. He's strident in his criticism of the other two branches being agile software development and lean manufacturing as being irrelevant to 90% of modern businesses who don't make things, just do services. So his work, his new book, Beyond Command and Control, is a great place to start reading from and getting others interested in the concepts that he talks about there. It's just come out this year. Bloody expensive book, but well worth it, I think. And the lean stuff is getting another play now. Toyota coming in a more flexible fashion, but the challenge is classically that the agile people, because they're software development natives, are really good at grabbing all of the HTML oxygen, and the lean people are still book writers. So as the chair of Lean Enterprise for Australia, it's just like the knowledge that people I meet have is unbelievable as a community and a practitioner community. It's all come from in-person transfer or books. And the books are expensive, and I apologize for that straight up front. So you're right, Warren, there's a great PR job to be done. The truth is the Agile Manifesto people, they never believed that it would become this enormous industry as a result of writing a manifesto. It's snowbird. But goodness me, there's more pixels written and committed to Agile than any of the other ways of doing. So I recommend a couple of books. The systems thinking, people have heard of this old book called The Fifth Discipline. The fifth of 5 disciplines is systems thinking. That might have been the late 80s or early 90s that was written. And just being able to see things as inputs, processes, and outputs. I think it has to start with us. We've got to read. We've got to tell stories.
My perspective on that is LAST stands for Lean, Agile, and Systems Thinking. And for me, systems thinking is the most interesting part of it and probably the most important. I've been looking to amplify it more and more. I was going to go full on this year in in the next one. My thinking was all about the environment and bushfires and stuff like that from that kind of angle of which Peter Senge, the Fifth Discipline author, is right into these days as well. Overfishing, that type of thing.
Yeah, that's the early ecosystem thinkers. That's exactly, and we sort of start and finish with our acknowledgement of the wisdom of the Australian Aboriginal people and Indigenous people, First Nations all over the world. They had no other way of thinking other than systems thinking accordingly.
Yeah. Okay, we've got probably that's that's all that's come in for now. And
well, I've got one more point, Ed. One more point.
Yep.
I just want to thank you and your team for what you're doing, keeping people connected. And I'm going to be brutal and ask, hey, if anyone has got a spare $10, there's a way of slipping Ed and his team a little bit of money, because if you're in events right now and you're in community building online, you are hurting. Ed will never say it, but I'm going to say it on his behalf. $10 or a little bit of money their way will help keep this community going and enable talks like this to keep happening.
Thanks, Nigel. Yeah, I'm just going to keep doing and finding interesting stuff. So Lentil as anything, the people who are at the Abbotsford Convent, where last conference was going to be this year, they were going to cage for us. If you don't know, their model is pay as you feel. And that's what I decided to do with these talks, at least. So I'm going to get some people from Lentil as anything to talk on that type of subject. And there's a few, quite a lot, a sort of pipeline of people who I'm talking to get up on this particular, in quotes, stage as we keep going. So yeah, please come back and check. And yeah, there is a support button on the menu, or a link on the menu of the Last Anywhere website. So, okay. Thanks so much, Nigel. Thanks to everyone who's stuck around. And we'll see you next time. We've got one tomorrow, which is Andrew Murphy, and he's talking about getting better at influencing people. And that's tomorrow morning at either 9:30 or 11:30, I think.
Check it on the website.
Without having it in front of me. Yeah. All right, 11:30.
Awesome.
Okay.
Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks all.
Thanks, Nigel.